Welcome to x-fhir-query. My name is Lloyd McKenzie. I've been involved with FHIR since before it was called FHIR. Most relevantly for today, I am project lead for the structured data capture initiative, which is where we invented x-fhir-query and initially wrote the spec. In the next 15 or so minutes, I'm going to tell you what x-fhir-query is for, help you to understand why it exists, and tell you at least a couple of the places where it's used. Decided to put together the presentation because I was talking to various people over the past year and saying, hey, you should use x-fhir-query, and they went, what? It's actually been in SDC for 4 or 5 years, and it moved into the FHIR R5 spec before R5 came out. But people weren't aware of it, and of course, not having a DevDays video publicly accessible doesn't help. So now we'll have one of those. Yay, DevDays. So as mentioned, x-fhir-query was first developed by Structured Data Capture, which is an implementation guide focused on questionnaires. But we moved it into the core specification as part of R5 because there's nothing that is terribly questionnaire specific to it. It's just a mechanism for defining queries when you want to embed variables as part of the query. There's 2 places that I know that it's used right now, which is SDC and most recently CDS hooks. It may be being used elsewhere, but nobody's mentioned it. And you can use it anywhere that you make use of the extension data type. So if you look in the R5 or the draft R6 specification, go to the documents page, you will see x-fhir-query sitting there alongside FHIRPath and patch. The use case for x-fhir-query is that you want to define a standard query that's going to be executed by a server or a client at some point. But the set of data that you want requires that the query change when you execute it. So I want, for example, all of the weights for this particular patient over the last 3 months. But who that patient is going to change depending on what patient I'm looking at, and 3 months is going to change every day in terms of how old I want it. So normally I would just write a query that looks like that, specifying the specific patient ID and the specific date, but that is locked to a specific patient and to a specific time period. And that doesn't satisfy my use case because we want those 2 particular data elements to change. What x-fhir-query says is let's replace the 1, 2, 3 with some FHIRPath and replace the date with some FHIRPath, and then we can have our regular query but have it be dynamic. And that's really all there is to it. You put curly braces inside your query expression, put valid FHIRPath inside those curly braces, and everything kind of works. So write your query. If you don't know how to write FHIR queries, I'm sure there is a session on how to do FHIR search this week. There's a session on everything this week. And then once you know how to do that for the particular set of data that you want, you replace whatever data elements in there you want to be dynamic with curly braces, put valid FHIRPath inside the curly braces. Everything that's available inside FHIRPath, all of your percent variables, etc., are still perfectly legal in there. And when the system that's supposed to run the query needs to run the query, it just needs to do a pre-processing step first. So it looks for double curly braces. If it finds any, it executes the FHIRPath with whatever context happens to be available. So if you're running it inside an SDC query, you have context that's available depending where within the questionnaire you happen to be. There might be variables defined elsewhere that might be accessible inside your FHIRPath, maybe other queries that you've already run, and then execute that FHIRPath, take whatever the results are, and shove that in place of whatever was inside the curly braces. There's a few extra things that we added to make the syntax do what we wanted it to do. First of all, you do have to not base64, but properly URL encode your content. So if you have colons or other things that are part of your search path expression, you do need to properly escape them. There is no expectation that that happens later. But when you are, after you've run your FHIRPath and you're about to stick it into the search expression, you do need to URL encode that content. So if there are colons or whatever inside the string content that comes back from that, you do need to escape that. Otherwise, your query isn't going to work terribly well. If you run a FHIRPath expression and you get back a collection, so this is an example where we're saying, go find the patient, go find all of the practitioners associated with the patient, and then I want their IDs, and this is a reference, so I can't get the ID out of that, but if I resolve it, I can get the IDs off of that, and I end up with a collection, and we just comma separate them before we substitute them into the search, because that then gives us a search that we know how to run. We have some other helper functions as well. So if you have an identifier or a coding or a reference, those are obviously complex types, but there are search types that they correspond to. So identifier, coding, and reference all in search behave as tokens, and so we just do that conversion. If you run the FHIRPath, it's going to come back as identifier or coding or reference, and so the extra step for x-fhir-query is to do that transformation and turn them into tokens. We do something similar with codable concept, except with codable concept we have a collection of codings, and so we just turn that into a collection of tokens, again comma separated. With quantity, we turn that into a quantity search parameter, and so you end up with something like this. So if instead of going after the IDs, I was going to go after identifiers instead, I can go patient.practitioner.identifier, because identifier can actually appear inside the reference. I could, if I wanted to say, well, it might appear inside the reference, or I might actually resolve, I could actually have done a union here and gone after both of them. And then I will end up taking the identifiers that come back, the system and the value, and again, getting a collection of tokens coming back. So not super complex to write, and it's a relatively useful and powerful thing in order to have reusable queries that do whatever you want. And because FHIRPath is pretty powerful, there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of creating fancier search expressions. If you want to embed this inside of a questionnaire, you'll do that using the expression data type. So there's a variable extension of type expression that we often use. We have a MIME type for it, which is application/x-fhir-query. And if you run it inside of an extension, the result of executing that query will be a search bundle. And that search bundle is then made available according to the name in your expression. And you can then actually navigate that in subsequent queries or other expressions. So with SDC, what we'll often do is we'll have a context that's passed in saying who is the current patient, who is the current user, and then we will want to go and grab conditions or allergies or other kinds of things. We could do that with CQL, but CQL was somewhat new at the time we were defining SDC, and we didn't want to go that far. We just said, well, I just want to run a query, but I just want to substitute some FHIRPath into pieces of it. And so x-fhir-query was what we did as a result. And then I can go and grab the condition, go and grab the allergy, and stick those into variables, and then navigate those for population or extraction or whatever it is I need to do within the questionnaire. So we want to go take a look at a couple of examples of that. And then, of course, I can't see what I'm presenting. So let's switch. There we go. Make that a little bit. Whoops. Why did it just go away? I'm wiggled. I should know better than to wiggle. Live demonstrations are awesome. Let's do that. There we go. Now you can see me. All right. So if we go look for here, I've got a candidate expression extension, which basically says these are a list of possible answers to the question. You're free to go and make up whatever other answers you want to make up. Make it bigger. There we go. Visible now? All right. So this says I'm going to grab your emergency contact, and I'm going to go and look up the list of related persons that exist for you. In this case, it's a very simple query. I'm just going and grabbing related persons that are associated with this particular patient and retrieving that. I'm not needing to do any further filtering other than that they are active. And this will then come back and provide that as the list. I don't have a name on this. Actually, I do have a name on this expression, which I could use elsewhere. I'm not. But that's all that you have to do to make it work. And if we go and look at a different example, this one is in CRD. These ones get a little bit more fun. Yep. So this is defining prefetch. Within CDS hooks, when you invoke a hook, you can say, this is data that I would like to come back. And ideally, it'll come back automatically. If not, I'll go and have to query for it. It looks a whole lot uglier than it actually is. So here, nice and simple, I'm going to go grab the patient, which has the ID percent context. Context is something that is passed in as part of the CDS hooks launch, and I get just a bare patient ID. I say, well, actually, I would like more than just the ID. I'd like the full patient, thanks. So it'll go grab that. Same deal with encounter. I get an ID, but I actually would kind of like to see what's in the encounter, so I'll go grab the whole thing. For coverage, I'm going to go grab all of the insurance for this particular patient. Again, a fairly simple thing. And then we get things a little bit more fun, where practitioner, there's a whole bunch of different practitioners I want. So I want, off of the encounter, I want to look at all the participants. I want to grab the individuals of those. I'm going to resolve them. I only want the ones that are of type practitioner, because it could be practitioner or organization or practitioner role or a whole bunch of other things. And I'm going to grab those IDs. So if it's practitioner, I want the practitioners directly. If it's practitioner role, then I want to go and grab the practitioner off of those and resolve those and get the IDs. But encounters doesn't just have participants, it also has service providers. So I'm going to do that same process for the encounters. And then I may have appointments, or I may have other kinds of things. And so I'm going to go through all of the different types of practitioners that I want and grab those, do the same thing for my practitioner roles, etc. And so there's a lot of stuff there, but the actual FHIR path itself is not overly complex. In fact, within CDS hooks, they limit how much FHIRPath you're allowed to use. They don't want you to go wild and crazy. So you have available to you resolve, you have available to you of type, but you don't have a whole lot above and beyond that. So that's what it looks like in practice. And come back here. So that's what x-fhir-query is. Basically, it's a standard FHIR search, and you just stick FHIRPath in the middle to make some portions of the FHIRPath dynamic. Whenever you have a standard query where you want some pieces of it to be able to change based on information that's available to you at runtime, x-fhir-query is a solution. We use it in SDC, we use it in CDS hooks, but it's a generic technology. It's defined in R5. You can use it, though, in R4 or STU2 or wherever you want. There's nothing R4 specific or R5 specific about it. Use it wherever you find it helpful. And we have, I believe, 4 whole minutes for Q&A. Any questions?
Do you have any, from experience, like a rule of thumb or whatever, when you would do, meta programming and sort of language you're implementing your FHIR with versus FHIR queries, or do you patterns for, like, maybe you have to, like, that query was a big blob. Do you have patterns for structuring that or rendering it, or is it just maintained manually? Or?
So the benefit of using something like x-fhir-query is that it is not programming language specific. So it doesn't matter if you're writing C# or Java or JavaScript or whatever. This is just a generic FHIR query. And there are FHIRPath engines in most programming languages that people are using with FHIR. So it makes it platform agnostic. And so if you're defining rules or structures that you want to be usable on any kind of platform, this gives you a syntax agnostic way of doing it. And it's also a safe way of doing it. So if I could write a bunch of JavaScript that would go do this and then give you the JavaScript, but then you would have to trust my JavaScript to not do bad things to your environment. Whereas FHIRPath is pretty limited in what it can do to your environment. All it can do is go and access data, and then you decide what you're doing with whatever comes back.
But you did write that monster by hand, right?
I did write that monster by hand. I had a bit more white space in it when I wrote it to make sure that it was sound. But
I know there's a few tools like Brian's FHIRPath lab that can help you check at least whether the syntax makes sense before you deploy it. I have multiple questions, but first, Ilya.
Could you please go back to slide with identifiers?
This one?
Yeah. So here we have a conversion when identifier is represented as system pipe value, but I don't think that lots of FHIRPath implementation do this conversion. If we run like
they don't.
Identifier to string, it will be something like JSON-like.
Yeah. So this is specific to the x-fhir-query syntax. So first you run your FHIRPath, and then there's an additional conversion step that happens.
Yeah. So it's responsibility of x-fhir-query implementation, not FHIR.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the comma delimited part is x-fhir-query specific, and the identifier or coding to token conversion is also x-fhir-query specific. So that's an extra layer on top of base FHIRPath.
Right. Simone, long time no see.
Are you aware of any tools that allow testing and debugging of x-fhir queries? I think you mentioned Brian's tool. But,
Brian's tool does the FHIRPath piece. I don't know if he's actually done the extra step to do the x-fhir-query on top of it, but I think he's here, so you and I together can sort of corral him, and I'm sure he'll be done by the end of the week, because that's who Brian is. All right.
Right. Thanks, Lloyd, for kicking this off. Thanks.